know why, because it's sitting under the Liberal. Okay, so this is so you know the order in which it's going to be constantly rotating.
Okay.
Okay? There you go. I'm going to try to get to this nice Saanich area also. I'm going to get the review together in 2 minutes over.
Yes.
You got here first.
No worries. That's not a problem. It's straightforward.
And I was to see if you needed water, but I see you've got water.
There's water here, so yeah. That'll be good.
My name's
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
So you've got
I think so, yeah. Seems pretty straightforward. I'll let you know if I have any questions. I got maybe, yeah, like this one is this will be one of the bigger ones that we have. Yeah, the last one, I think the first one we did in Sydney 2 weeks ago was probably similar in size. That was at the what's the St. Paul's United Church? Yeah, that one has a fairly big auditorium.
Now, I just want you to be really aware of this drop down.
Yes.
Okay, that's why we put the tape there, but I thought, oh my God, yeah. Be careful. Yeah.
It says opening, so that means that it'll carry home and then out.
No, that's it. That's your seating.
Oh.
And the openings, but it's the same, yes. The opening
Okay.
area will you'll be third.
Okay.
And then it just rotates all the way. But it doesn't rotate. Because I mix it up too, so that there's something.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, each one of the bases either like starting with back or
Yeah.
something like that. Switching it up, then everyone gets a different chance to run.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know if I can in 2 sentences. It's very hard because as an independent, I'm not necessarily on the political spectrum. I would say I'm quite centered. I definitely find the fiscal conservatism very attractive, like balanced budgets and everything. But then again, I do see green energy as the future. And as much as we still use fossil fuels for cars, for plastics, the transition is going to happen whether the government wants to. It's just whether or not it's speeding up. Yeah, I don't know if I can tell you 2 sentences or not. Yeah, a
I
sentence.
don't know where to place you.
Yeah.
The first time I moderated this week was the guy from the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
kind of nice to know when people stand on.
Libertarian is very interesting for sure.
Well, I sort of got his line with private property.
Yeah.
So, did you want to tonight?
So good, good. How are you? These are the dates that we're going to air at the time, so you can make an announcement.
Oh yeah, for sure I will. Yeah, I'll do that at the. We'll do that at the end. We turned off. Thank you.
I don't know. They had the signs there, so I wasn't.
Then this is for a community, the whole community, not just. I would like to, as our series sponsors, Home Energy Solution Applications, and It's Only Natural Clothing.
Questions that have been prepared by the BC Sustainable Energy Association, and the candidates will respond to those questions with the following timing. They'll have 2 minutes to respond to the question, and then after they've responded, they will have the opportunity with these prepared questions to do a rebuttal for 30 seconds, so not very long. Now, the debate that we had last week was a little weak on the sort of energy exchange side. So I took the liberty of looking up the meaning of rebuttal right now. I'm going to engage in rebuttal in one another. Then we ask the candidates to stop, just to finish up that sentence and to move on. Okay, that's a little bit more on order here. The prepared topics for the evening, so you know what's coming, are on renewable energy transition, climate action, green economy and green jobs, Site C, Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Expansion Project, energy poverty, and natural gas fracking LNG all in one. So that just gives you an idea of what the prepared ones are going to be. The audience questions, we will take them in two ways. One is lining up, or the other is written questions. If you want to do a written question, there's a table just at the back there behind the cameras, and there's a woman, Terry, there's two women standing up there who will also be collecting questions if you have them. The only thing that we ask you is when you write your questions, please also put your name on, because sometimes we need to clarify what people mean by their questions. And then we will alternate from the floor and from the written questions with respect to people who actually feel more shy about standing up but really want their question asked. You will have 30 seconds to ask audience questions, and then the candidates will have 1 minute each to respond. And I will only allow rebuttals for that one if it looks like there's good energy around it, so we can maximize questions from the folks in the audience. And there may be a little bit of time for informal conversation with the candidates following the event. I don't know, but you can certainly stay here if you're able to do that. And somebody suggested on the questions being asked that should you wish to ask questions of the Liberal candidate who's not here, you could write those down and then perhaps we could find a way to send those questions to the Liberal candidate. So, without further ado...
We'll answer for him.
Oh, they'll answer for him. Okay, all right. Well, we'll do double duty here. Thank you. Thank you. So the candidates themselves have a complicated random order rotation that we're doing to make sure that people get an equal number of firsts, seconds, and thirds in relation to one another. So we're going to begin with the opening statements, and the order for the opening statements will begin with Gary Holman of the New Democratic Party, followed by Adam Olsen, the Green Party, and then Jordan Templeman, Independent. And then we'll move into a different rotation after that. So you're on, Gary.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks to the BC Sustainable Energy Association and to all you folks for coming out tonight. I'm really looking forward to tonight's debate. It's been an honor to be your MLA for the past 4 years, and I've done my best to live up to my platform commitments, my promises, and which include, by the way, some issues, some initiatives that do have a direct bearing on climate change. A little bit of background about myself. I'm an economist by background. I've worked for 30 years as a professional economist. During the 90s, I worked on the land use planning process initiated by Mike Harcourt that resulted in a doubling of parkland in British Columbia and might I say, created one of the largest carbon sinks in North America. I also worked on the fisheries component of the Nisga'a Treaty, which was a landmark treaty, the first modern-day treaty signed in Canada, and that was signed by the Glenn Clark government in 1998. I come from Salt Spring Island, lived there for 25 years. I was their Capital Regional District Director for 2 terms for 6 years. One of the things I'm most proud of there is I started the bus system on Salt Spring. So you can now take the bus, walk onto the ferry, and take the bus into Ganges and spend all your money in Saturday market and come back the next night. That's something I'm very proud of and obviously has a direct implication for reduction of car use. Really looking forward to this debate. There's one theme that I'm going to keep coming back to in this debate, and it's fine to have discussions about the respective positions on climate action, and I'm really looking forward to that. But I really want to impress on people that the only way these changes are going to happen in a significant way, the only way we're going to significantly address climate change is to change the provincial government in this province. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gary. Adam Olsen.
Aids Gwachel Halat Siamna Aids Jalicha. Sahanap Tenatsene. Jisalea Senet Ayanich. Lay it with Othlip at the lungs. My name is Sahanap. That's my Co-Salish name. My given name is Adam Olsen. Born and raised on the Chotlip First Nation, Sartlip in Brentwood Bay from the Saanich territory. Thank you for your acknowledgement of our territory. My late grandmother Laura Olsen shared with me about 10 years ago the responsibility, or reminded me actually of the responsibility that we Saanich people have, everybody, including you. If you live in Saanich, you share this responsibility to our home, to look after our place. And that is what inspired me to get involved in community service. That's what inspired me to walk across the line and become elected in Central Saanich so that we can look after our home. And that's what inspired me to get involved in provincial politics. Despite what the critic of democratic reform, Mr. Holman, will tell you, there are many ways in which we can change our democracy. And in fact, the Greens have proven to be good for democracy. Dr. Andrew Weaver has proven to be a strong voice in pushing the NDP into places that they're not comfortable being, adopting positions that they would not have taken had we not been there. Consider the BC Greens as an important insurance policy to ensure that they walk the talk. What you'll hear tonight are stark contrasts. If you really want to take action on climate, if you really want us to embrace the emerging economy, then it is important that we have strong green voices in the legislature ensuring that accountability is there, ensuring that there is transparency, and ensuring that the politicians in the establishment parties do what they say they're going to do, because we've got a long track record of saying one thing and doing another in our province, and the BC Greens are good for democracy. I look forward to your questions. Thank you for coming this evening. Heichka.
Thank you, Adam. And Jordan Templeton, Independent.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for coming out and coming and listening to what we have to say. I look forward to your questions. My name is Jordan Templeman, and I'm the independent candidate for our district of Saanich North and the Islands. I am halfway through my political science degree, and what my studies have taught me have been a strong understanding of how our political system works. And I think more importantly, it has given me a large passion for our political system. I am currently taking a semester off of school to work in construction to pay for my education, but I will be returning back to my studies in September. The reason I chose to run as an independent is that I believe the voice of the constituents and the voice of the people should be heard and followed over any voice of any particular party. And I think that having a representative that has this view is more important in this election than it has been in elections of the past. And that's because we have a high likelihood of a minority government in this coming election. And one of the things about a minority government is that parties and members of parties are pushed more to follow along party lines and vote with other parties, vote within their own party. And when this happens, and when our legislature gets full of party politics, we see a loss of representation for what the true voice of the people are saying. As an independent, I don't have a party, and I don't have this conflict of interest between serving my party and serving the constituents. My platform and my campaign that I'm running here is one of new ideas. I am youthful, I'm hardworking, and I'm very determined to be the best representative we can have here in this district. Thank you for coming out, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Jordan. So the first prepared question to the candidates is related to renewable energy transition. And for each of the questions, I'm going to be doing a brief preamble. Despite our mostly clean electricity system, about 4/5 of all of the energy used in BC comes from burning fossil fuels. Around the world, switching from fossil fuels to renewable energy is increasingly seen as a key to reducing carbon emissions and keeping climate change to a minimum. Renewable energies like wind and solar are now cost competitive with fossil fuels and often less expensive, and their development is causing a boom in clean tech investment and employment globally. Vancouver and Victoria, as Tom said in his introduction, are committed to a target of 100% renewable energy for the whole community by 2050, and the District of Saanich is actively considering this. The question to the candidates is, do you support BC shifting to meet its energy needs from renewable sources? If so, how would you support this in the next 4 years? And how would you support municipalities to achieve their 100% renewable energy targets? And the first response is to Adam.
The answer to the question, thank you for the question, and the answer is yes. Of course we will. The BC Greens have got a very dynamic plan in our fully costed platform. I encourage you to check it out online. A couple of the points is we're going to revisit the mandate of BC Hydro to optimize the support for clean energy development in our province, to ensure that there's grid storage for community and private production. We're going to introduce progressively more stringent requirements to adapt to low-carbon fuels. We're going to invest and incent in behavioral change. And I think that it's really important that we emphasize here that our plan is based around the low-carbon choice becoming the default choice for British Columbians. And the way that we do that is we ensure that those choices are available, they're affordable, and they're acceptable. In terms of how we can help municipalities, and it's true, we set these very aggressive targets, and then when I was on Central Saanich Council, there was very little support from municipalities. And one of the things that a couple of things that we're focusing on in our plan is to ensure that we're greening the transportation network. That includes investments in transit. That also includes investments in modal shifts, so that people have the opportunity to invest in zero emission vehicles. As well, for municipalities, buildings are really, really important, and our plan includes a very bold and aggressive plan to retrofit buildings. So I think that what you'll see in our plan is that we've thought this through, and that we've got the best plan that's being put forward in this election.
Thank you. Adam. Jordan.
Yes, as well. I do support the transition from fossil fuels to green energy. I believe that our transition is inevitable, especially with the advancements we have in clean energy technology. It is getting cheaper every year to produce sustainable clean energy, and growing up in a generation where clean and sustainable energy such as solar and wind in many ways seems to be a norm, I see this as absolutely inevitable that we will one day get to a point where our economy and our province is run on clean energy. But I guess this remains with a few questions on why aren't we there yet? And I think this really boils down to two of the large factors, and these large factors are the use of plastics and the use of transportation, in specific personal transportation. What I aim to do is to increase funding towards research on bioplastics, such as hemp plastic and other forms. Hemp plastic is already used at an industrial level, and we need to invest more research into it to make it more affordable so we can have it in everyday use. As well, when we look at transportation, and as I said, I want to specifically look at personal transportation, something that we can look into is electric cars. In BC, we have extremely clean energy coming from our grid. It's mostly from hydro. This means that the electric cars are quite emission-free comparative to an area that has cars where the power and the grid systems are powered by coal plants or other fossil fuel burning plants. So we need to look into other ways to support a growth in the amount of people who use electric cars and electric transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And the last person is Gary Holman on this one, renewable energy.
Well, thanks very much. The answer, of course, is yes. There are several elements to this answer. I do want to again point out the absence of the Liberal candidate here, and to point out that, in fact, in British Columbia, despite the introduction of the carbon tax a number of years ago, that carbon tax has been frozen. By the way, in reference to Adam's earlier comments, Andrew Weaver supported the first two Liberal budgets that he voted on in the legislature, which included freezing of the carbon tax, which is why greenhouse gas emissions have been increasing in the past 5 years. So we put forward two, I guess, main aspects that we're going to be canvassing in more detail later. One is a detailed climate action plan that essentially reflects the recommendations made by the climate leadership team appointed by Christy Clark and then promptly ignored. So there are a number of elements to that plan, but we essentially will be increasing the carbon tax over the next few years up to $50 per ton as mandated by the federal government, a federal government that Andrew Weaver all recommended that we vote for, the Liberal government. We'll be generating incremental revenue. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives estimates about $240 million a year will be reinvested by our plan into actions that directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions like public transit and energy conservation retrofits. The second aspect is power production in British Columbia. The key issue with respect to power production isn't so much the carbon footprint. As noted, 93% of our power production is GHG free. The key issue with respect to power production is cost efficiency. And please remember the independent power projects that's left us with a huge surplus of power in British Columbia, again costing ratepayers hundreds of millions of dollars per year.
Thank you, Gary. And now the 30-second rebuttal, again with the same order. Over to you, Adam.
Yeah, look, I'll just say that over the past 4 years, we've seen the BC Liberal government pushing out renewable energy organizations such as geothermal and wind. We've seen them turn down a wind-powered project here on Vancouver Island. And look, if we want to get into the number of times that each supported the BC Liberals. I think we'll find that actually the BC NDP supported the BC Liberals on far more occasions than Andrew did, and the numbers show that.
That's your time. Thank you very much. Adam? Jordan?
I would just like to comment on something Gary said. He said that the reason why our carbon emissions are still going up is because we've had a freeze on our carbon tax. I don't believe it's because of a freeze. I believe it's because of where the revenue gained from a carbon tax is going. All of the revenue gained from a carbon tax needs to go directly into new clean energy sources, such as wind and solar and other. If we just keep putting it into general revenue, we're going to just see the same old happen, and no growth in our clean sector will ever be had. It's not about necessarily the percent or the price we have in carbon tax, it's about where we're putting the money.
That's it, Jordan. Thank you. And Gary?
Well, our emissions have been increasing in British Columbia in the last 5 years because the carbon tax has been frozen and because it hasn't been reinvested in actions that directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I want you folks to think about whether we've walked the talk, right, as candidates. For the past 4 years as the MLA, I'm the only one not only advocating public transit, but talking about how we can fund it. The recommendation by the Greater Victoria Transit Commission, the 2-cent increase in the levy, I'm the only one here that has advocated increasing that levy to get us out of our cars.
Thank you. Gary, thank you. And now to question number 2, which is a climate action question. And Jordan, you're on first for this one. The 2015 Paris Agreement commits Canada and other nations of the world to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius and to try to keep it to below 1.5 degrees. The target of 80% greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2050 has been adopted as necessary by Canada, the US, under the former president, and many other countries. BC has legislated this as our greenhouse gas reduction target. But the climate leadership plan that the BC government finally adopted in 2016 would take us less than halfway there. The question to the candidates: do you support putting in place a concrete plan for greenhouse gas reductions that would put BC on track to meet its legislated target of 80% reduction by 2050? If so, what measures would you implement in the next 4 years? If not, what do you say BC's greenhouse gas reduction targets should be? Over to you, Jordan.
Yes, this is something that Canada has put forward and agreed to, and we are part of Canada, and we have to pull our own weight when it comes to this and comes to reduction of emissions. Now, one of the things that I believe on a practical level we need to focus on as a province, though, instead of having our goal as a 80% reduction over 33 years, we need to look at it on more short-term scale. And I believe this is because it's about accountability. Every election that we have, when our governments tell us, yes, we have this target and it's 30, 40, 50 years in the future, they never make the right progress now. We see it as, oh, this is what we're doing 10 years from now or 15 years from now. Our target should be set on a 4 to 5 year scale that match up with our election cycle, so that every election we have, we can see the current government and look at them and keep them accountable to the promises that they've made. This, I believe, can create a better structure of our reduction plan, and will lead to a better reduction of our emissions.
Thank you, Jordan. And speaking next, Gary Holman for the New Democratic Party.
Yes to a concrete plan. We accept the targets recommended by the climate leadership team. I believe the Green Party has accepted the same targets, which are 40% below 2007 levels by 2030 and 80% below those levels by 2050. The key target is the short-term target, and I come back to my theme that I expressed earlier. We need to change government in this province so we can turn this ship around and not just be debating rhetorically about the merits, the pros and cons of our respective, particular plans. We're adopting the bulk of the recommendations by the climate leadership team. Their modeling done for that group indicates that they will approach the 80% reduction target by 2050, but the key target is 2030, and again, to note the absence of our Liberal colleague here, the Liberal government has completely missed its 2020 legislated target. My understanding is they haven't even adopted a target for 2030. They have adopted the 80% target for 2050, but that's ridiculous. No government is going to be in power that long. God forbid it would be the Liberals being in power that long. But we have to turn the ship around, and the only way we're going to do that is by changing government. So as I indicated before, we will be increasing the carbon tax. We will be reinvesting $240 million a year in British Columbia, in public transit, in energy conservation retrofits across all sectors, and very importantly as well, Mark Jacquard, the economist, regulatory measures are also needed in order to meet those targets. Also, there's a fairness issue here, and we've adopted a dividend, a rebate approach to ensure families aren't unfairly impacted.
Thank you very much. And I'll give you a little pause. And now Adam Olson of the Green Party.
So it was all plain for everybody to see that Andrew Weaver did actually change our government. He changed our government in many ways because he added another layer of accountability, and I encourage you to embrace that. Imagine what a few more Greens can do. We have promised to legislate the 40% below 2007 limits by 2030. We're going to legislate that, not accept it, but legislate it. We're also going to meet the 80% below 2007 by 2050. We're going to meet that target. We're going to do that because we're going to increase the carbon tax over the next 4 years to $70 per ton. We're also going to be adding fugitive and vented emissions into the carbon tax, and that's something that the BC Green Party is very serious about doing. As well, we're going to stop slash pile burning. So you're not going to be able to just burn a big pile of slash in the forests any longer. The plan that we have put forward by our, Andrew Weaver has more experience in this than the entire legislature combined, and he's put forward a plan, we've put forward a plan that is going to meet and exceed those targets, because we don't see this as a challenge. We see it as the opportunity of the 21st century, and we're going to embrace that opportunity that's ahead of us.
Thank you. And now for the 30-second rebuttal, starting with Jordan.
I don't really have a lot to rebut against these comments. We all seem to be on agreement that these targets need to be hit, and I'm actually quite happy that we all are on the same page here. Unfortunately, we don't get to hear what Stephen Roberts had to say on this issue.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jordan. And now Gary.
So just to be clear, I use the word accept. We will be legislating those targets as well, but so did the Liberals legislate the targets. So you really have to walk the talk here. It's not just around targets. We need to focus on that short-term target. Again, just a point locally here, we need to look at our own behavior. And again, I said I'm the only candidate here that's not only advocated public transit, but how to pay for it. Urban sprawl on the peninsula is a very serious issue. We're a very car-dependent community.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you.
Just to be clear, we only had one MLA, so that's the reason why there was only one person doing that work and getting paid for it. But I asked the question, where was the NDP on the LNG legislation? Where were you on thermal coal? Where were you on climate change debates? Why was Andrew Weaver the only one calling for emergency debates on climate change while our forest burned? Why did the NDP sit down and just watch that and not support Andrew? Because it was far too political in there. That's why.
Thank you, Adam. So my sort of felt need to encourage a little bit of rebuttal energy was unnecessary. I think it was already percolating here. Okay, so we'll now move to the third question. Which is, sorry, to turn my page over before, green economy. So Exporting natural resources has worked well for BC in the past, providing jobs and helping us achieve a high standard of living. But global changes may challenge this. Automation and global markets have squeezed many jobs out of our resource industries, causing mill closures and driving us towards more raw log exports and fewer finished products. And the need to minimize disruptive climate change drives an urgent search for alternatives to fossil fuel energy. One potential bright spot is the renewable energy sector, where worldwide employment has grown from 1.3 million in 2004 to 6.7 million today, including 19,000 jobs in Canada. The UN's Green Economy Initiative finds that the greening of economies generally stimulates them and is a net generator of good jobs. So the question to the candidates, do you support BC's developing a green economy? And if so, what would you do to generate green jobs in BC, and what sectors would you focus on? And the first person to speak is Gary Holman for the New Democratic Party.
Well, thanks very much. Our climate action plan, again, the reinvestment of $240 million a year in public transit, and energy conservation retrofits, those kinds of things are going to generate thousands and thousands of jobs. Our proposal, Power BC, is an alternative to Site C. Our focus would be on energy conservation retrofits, again, across all sectors throughout British Columbia. Will generate far more jobs than Site C throughout British Columbia without submerging thousands of acres of farmland. We're going to use government procurement to stimulate the local economy. Will require hospitals to use at least 30% of their food from local food production. We'll be investing a higher proportion of the $700 million a year that government spends on IT contracts that go primarily to multinationals. We'll be focusing on local suppliers. We'll be building ferries in British Columbia. Wood manufacturing, we're going to restrict raw log exports and ensure that any mill that wants to process wood in British Columbia will have access to those logs. There'll be a particular focus on engineered wood products, which are a very important part of passive house construction. We're going to be investing in a clean technology fund that will stimulate clean technology in British Columbia. We are committed to building over 11,000 units of affordable housing in British Columbia each and every year, and I'm very pleased to announce that that funding will also be applied to First Nations in British Columbia. It's something that I've worked a lot on. And just in terms of the advocacy for public transit, I don't think you have to be paid in order to be an advocate for public transit or any kind of climate action.
Thank you, Gary. And now over to Adam Olson.
Yeah, so the BC Green Party platform is proposing two pieces. One, an emerging economy task force, which is going to put us on track to become leaders, not laggards in this. Currently, the government is going to get dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century as they cling to 20th century technologies. We're going to create an innovation commission and a commissioner who will be an ambassador for clean tech, high tech businesses in our province as we embrace the 21st century. We also look at not only just highways like the ones that we drive on, but also the information highways, the digital technology, connecting our communities, not with just roads, but with also the information superhighway. We're going to invest $130 million in industry and research and development. And as well, we've got a very aggressive retrofit program. Look, our lifelong learning plan is a very bold, very courageous step toward an investment in our future. Because we know that the jobs of tomorrow are different than the jobs of yesterday. And it's really important that we are preparing British Columbians for that. That's the reason why we're spending, and our fully costed platform, $8.5 billion from our very youngest children all the way through to retirement. Because I'm not looking at 1 or 2 jobs in my career. I'm looking at 15 or 16 jobs in my career, and it's going to require a huge amount of support, a huge amount of re-education, retooling, reskilling the workforce on a regular basis, and British Columbians need to know that the government's going to be there supporting them in their re-education as is necessary in the 21st century.
Thank you, Adam. And then Jordan Templeman, our independent candidate.
So yes, I do as well support the growth of our green economy. It is, as I said earlier, it is the inevitable future for our economy. But I want to make this clear, alongside supporting the green development sector, I support our natural resource sector. Currently in BC, large portion of our exports and our economy relies on it. This is not something we can get away from right yet, and it's not something that is going away anytime soon. But what I want to see for our province is I want to see our resource sector fund our green sector. And as I said earlier, this should be done through our carbon tax, with 100% of the revenue gained through the carbon tax going into green energy. That's not what we're seeing right now. And as well, I want to address the statement made in the preamble that the global markets are restricting our manufacturing industry from not allowing us to refine our logs or refine our oil. I don't believe it's the global markets that are doing that. I believe it's our markets here. Right now, we charge stumpage on trees that companies want to buy or want to cut down. This is something they're buying from the province, from all of us. That means we have the ability to put regulations on that. We can tell them that they have to have a certain number milled before any exported. These are regulations that are within our jurisdiction to put on there. As well, we can put restrictions on refining oil before it is exported. This helps our environment because, as we all know, crude oil is much more harmful, and as well, it provides a massive refining sector that provides jobs and an industry that will give us a large amount of refined oil. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And now, I just want to appreciate the candidates for getting very meaty and specific in response to this question. Lots of interesting ideas and proposals. So the rebuttal, first to Gary.
Well, I don't think the establishment of a task force and a commission is particularly specific. I just want to remind people that if we don't change government in this province, we're going to get Kinder Morgan, we're going to get Site C, we're going to get Steelhead LNG, and our greenhouse gas emissions will continue to rise as they have for the past years. Service levels, transit service levels in the Greater Victoria area have been frozen for 7 years. We'll continue to get that as well. We need to change government to make these changes.
Thank you. Adam?
Says the candidate whose leaders had a number of opinions on Kinder Morgan. I think after Adrian Dick stepped out and took the right course in history, John Horgan was there the next day defending, oh, maybe we can swing it down towards the south. Says the candidate whose party supports wood fiber LNG but not steelhead LNG, yet the situation in Squamish and in Howe Sound is very similar to the one in Saanich. I think the problem here is that there is inconsistency with
Adam.
the NDP.
Thank you. And Jordan?
I want to challenge the idea that the only way we can make this change is by changing our government, because that is not the only way. As an independent, I have the ability to, in a way, have parties, as odd as it sounds, buy my support for the benefit of our district. That means if I am in legislature and they want my support for a bill, they have to be willing to give something that will benefit us as a district. These types of things can benefit all of BC, and they can benefit us here at home.
Thank you, Jordan. And now moving on to question 4. This is about Site C. Bear with me, the preamble is a little longer for this one. The Site C hydroelectric dam project under construction on the Peace River near Fort St. John is BC's most expensive public infrastructure project ever, at $8.8 billion and counting. It would add about 10% to BC Hydro's generating capacity and is designed to produce reliable power at short notice. However, since the project received approval, BC Hydro's load forecasts have been revised downward significantly. It was already expected to lose $800 million in its first 4 years of operation, selling surplus power for export. Now, BC Hydro says electricity from Site C would not be needed for domestic use for another 20 or more years. Site C will leave BC Hydro with an unprecedented long-term debt and drive up electricity rates as it squeezes out opportunities for smaller scale and more sustainable energy solutions. The reservoir that will be created with the dam will obliterate valuable Peace River Valley farmland at a time when our food security must be defended against the effects of climate change. The flooding will also destroy significant West Moberly and Prophet River First Nations treaty lands. More than 100,000 people have signed petitions demanding the project be reviewed. First Nations across Canada have demanded that this project be stopped. The Union of BC Municipalities has called twice for an independent review. 200 scientists and the Royal Society of Canada have said that the project should be suspended. The question: what would you do about the Site C project if your party forms the next government? And the first goes to question number 4 to Gary Holman.
Well, thanks. Well, as recommended by Harry Swain, the chair of the Joint Review Panel that looked at Site C, we would refer Site C to the BC Utilities Commission. The precluding, the gutting of the BC Utilities Commission authority around power development in British Columbia is the key to the problem here. This is the nub of the problem. All of those private independent power projects that Andrew Weaver supported, like I say, the Utilities Commission were cut out of the decisions on that, and as a result, we have a huge surplus of power in British Columbia. We are committed, as a result of that, to BC Hydro is committed to purchasing power at 12, 14 cents per kilowatt hour and selling it for a fraction of that into export markets. Site C, we're going down exactly the same road. The absence of the Utilities Commission is the nub of the problem here. We would refer Site C to the Utilities Commission to determine what's the state of the project. Is it going to cost $9 billion, or is it more likely going to cost 12, 13, 14 billion? A prudent government needs to examine the state of the project. We need to look at those contracts to see if we can get out of them. We will cancel Site C if it's financially prudent to do so. But we need to get the details. We need to have the detailed review. We need to do the due diligence, and that's accomplished through the Utilities Commission. That's the key issue here that's been missing from the picture in British Columbia these past decades. And it's costing ratepayers. It's costing you folks. It's costing businesses here on the peninsula and throughout British Columbia hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And this is why I was saying, in terms of the power issue in British Columbia, it's not so much the clean aspect of it. They're all relatively clean. What's absolutely crucial is to make sure we are investing in the most cost-effective way that we can.
Thank you very much. Jordan.
I oppose Site C as well, and it is not due to the environmental impact it would have on farmlands and treaty lands, although those need to be taken into consideration and negotiated properly. It is because of the economics. It is because currently the BC Site C dam would cost $9 billion, and as the preamble stated, we would not need that power for BC residents for another 20 years or so. I believe this stems from a confusion, in my opinion, of what a Crown Corporation's goal and purpose should be. In my opinion, the purpose of a Crown Corporation is to provide a service. It is not to make a profit for the province. Currently, BC Hydro has a surplus of last year, and the surplus went directly into general revenue. This is not what a surplus for a Crown Corporation should have. It should have, if we have a surplus with a Crown Corporation, it should be put back into the rates. So that means the rates will be lowered. Unfortunately, with Site C Dam, what's going to happen is any energy that it does produce is going to be exported at, as Gary said, a fraction of what we are producing it at. This is not a project we need now, and it will only cause a rise in hydro rates once again, which need to be lowered because this is one of the largest expenses for individuals and for small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Okay, Adam.
So the BC Greens have committed to stopping the project. We're not going to play kick the can down the road on this one and allow the BC Hydro to continue to spend money and continue to add to the economic formula with which Mr. Holman was talking about, which is we're not interested in throwing good money after bad. We've we've seen the studies, we've seen the reports. We know that this project is a bad project, and it's dragging British Columbia down. And so for me, the economic, social, cultural, environmental formula, it just is totally against Site C. We're going to stop it. The BC Utilities Commission, it might have been great for us to send it there to begin with, but the fact is that they're pouring money into this. Premier Christy Clark is committed to getting this project past the point of no return. What we need now is political leadership, not kicking the can down the road to a situation in which then perhaps a future government can say, well, we've spent too much, so now we've got to chase bad money with good.
Thank you, Adam. And now rebuttal, Gary Holman, NDP.
Well, look, the decision a new government is going to have to make, economists use the phrase sunk costs are sunk. The decision a new government is going to have to make, and believe me, folks, the only way Site C is going to get stopped is if we have a new government, is to look at the incremental spend that's required to complete Site C. Very likely it's going to cost overrun. We need to know that. We need to know the status of the contracts. We need to do our due diligence. That's our responsibility to taxpayers in British Columbia.
Thank you. Jordan.
I don't have a lot more to add to what has been said here about Site C. I will add that, just to put emphasis on, when we look at the lands that Site C the reservoir would be over top of, yes, part of them are within Native treaty lands, and I do support the right of Native treaty lands to have to be negotiated, and we have to have their approval before we start using their lands.
Thank you, Jordan. And Adam.
Look, it's pretty clear that the NDP are in a very tough place on this one, and specifically on big infrastructure projects. They've taken huge donations from companies and from unions that have got skin in this game. Is clear the reason why they're sending this to the Utilities Commission and why they're delaying on this. The BC Greens are making, we're going to be on the right side of history on this one, and we've committed to spending your money prudently by not spending it anymore on Site C.
Thank you, Adam. And now moving on to question 5, which is the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Expansion Project. Kinder Morgan proposes to ship 590,000 barrels of oil a day from Alberta to foreign markets, increasing tanker traffic to 400 per year through the Burrard Inlet, the Salish Sea, and the Strait of Juan de Fuca, right past your front yard here. The carbon emissions from the production to the eventual consumption of the oil would be 126 million tons each year. For comparison, this is roughly twice the level of BC's emissions. In January this year, BC granted an environmental certificate to the project, and Premier Clark announced a special deal for Kinder Morgan to pay BC 25 to 50 million per year. But opponents continue to reject the project, saying the risk of harm from oil spills and increased tanker traffic are too great, that its added carbon emissions are incompatible with action on climate change, and that it is simply not good for BC. The Union of BC Indian Chiefs opposes the project, as do the majority of First Nations along the pipeline route, the cities of Victoria, Vancouver, and Burnaby, and other BC municipalities. The question to the candidates is, do you support the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project? If so, why? If not, what would you do to stop it? And the first person to respond to this one is Adam Olson of the Green Party.
No, I don't. And I get to say this time. I was the only candidate on this stage that was an intervener in the National Energy Board hearing of Kinder Morgan. I invested my time, my own time, my family's resources in standing up for my rights and our rights as a community on this issue. My family have been fishermen and fisher people in the Salish Sea for countless generations. We are inextricably tied to, we are tied in ways that cannot be explained in the English language to the Salish Sea. This is a very, very important issue to me. I will not support the the building of 50 years more commitment to fossil fuels, and I will not support the transports of diluted bitumen through the Salish Sea. I was very, very clear on this during the National Energy Board process. And I just want to say, you know what? I didn't sit back and wait to find out where the public were on this issue. I stood up and was accounted for when it was time to stand up and be accounted for. And that's what you'll get with me as your MLA, standing up for you, not standing up for the BC Green Party, but standing up and representing this seat, Saanich, our seat, our office. It's yours, and I will have the honor to represent you in the legislature. I will always put you first. I will never, ever, ever put the BC Green Party first when it comes to our interests.
Thank you, Gary. And now, thank you, Adam. And now Gary Holman, New Democratic Party.
I don't support Kinder Morgan. The NDP doesn't support the Kinder Morgan ever since, as Adam mentioned, Adrian Dix announced his opposition in the middle of the 2013 campaign. Some people feel that standing on principle like that by Adrian cost us the election. John Horgan and our environment critic of the day, Spencer Chandra Herbert, wrote to the National Energy Board a very detailed letter, also opposed Enbridge, by the way, a very detailed letter opposing Kinder Morgan. So I commend Adam for interfering, tried to interfere. They wouldn't let him interfere, for intervening in the hearings. We put it in writing, our opposition to Kinder Morgan. I'm the only one here that's actually advocating for an alternative for the gradual industrialization of the Salish Sea. I don't support Steelhead LNG. I don't support Kinder Morgan. What I do support is the establishment of a national marine conservation area under the co-management and consent of First Nations. That's the direction we need to go in the Salish Sea, and I'm the only one advocating for that. Kinder Morgan, we can go through all the reasons why we oppose it. Simply put, the risks outweigh the benefits. In terms of our union connections, we are going to be banning political donations from corporations and unions. If we are elected, we are not going to tie both hands behind our backs because we need to change government in this province. We will play by the rules, and then we will change the rules, and we're not going to, on the eve of an election, tie both hands behind our back.
Thank you, Gary. And now, Jordan.
So I'm going to take a little different approach when it comes to the Kinder Morgan than the other two candidates have. No, I don't support it in its current form, but I want to try and find a balance between our environment and our economy and our fuel sector. This means that we have to try and find a way to make this work in our area. Yes, currently the environmental risks of transporting diluted crude bitumen outweigh any economic benefit, and I will absolutely stand by that. But as I mentioned earlier, I want to try and find a way to make BC a refined exporter of refined goods rather than raw goods. Crude bitumen is a raw, unrefined oil. If we can encourage and grow a refining sector in BC, we can get the oil instead of crude oil, which is also being transported now as well. This is an expansion project, to be refined oil, which is easier or at least possible to clean up in the event of a spill, and we are not completely closing the door on an economic benefit such as the oil. When we look at crude bitumen, and I want to stress the absolute opposition to crude bitumen oil. It is a heavy oil that has a tendency to sink when mixed with sediment in oceans. This means it's going to sit on the bottom of our ocean bed, well, a portion of it will, and it's not something that can be cleaned up. It's not something that will ever be cleaned up. So when we have a spill of crude oil, it means that we have polluted our oceans for the foreseeable future. We need to refine the oil to gain the economic benefit while still maintaining a protection of our environment.
Thank you, Jordan. And now to the rebuttal, Adam Olson first.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the point that I made. Kudos to Adrian Dix for coming out on the right side of history, but I think that the following day was confusing for a lot of us when the current leader came out and tried to make excuses and apologize for the position that the former leader took. And I think that that has confused British Columbians. Finally, I'll say this. My hands are not tied. Look at my campaign. I've got a great campaign. All of the money that we've raised has come from people just like you. My hands are not tied. In fact, I've never felt freer.
And now to Gary Holman.
So electing a provincial government in this province starts with the election here in Saanich North in the Islands, but it doesn't end here. In order to compete with the most moneyed party in British Columbia, we are going to play by the rules and then change the rules. And regarding Kinder Morgan, I don't know what more evidence you need, a written, formal opposition to the project by John Horgan. I don't know what else we need to say about that.
Thank you, Gary. And finally, Jordan on the rebuttal.
So as I said, I believe in a balance between our environment and our economy, and I will stand by that. It's a balance that I think we can make work. And seeing as it seems to be a topic right now, regarding campaign donations, I have two, myself and my parents.
Well done. You're the freest.
Good thing you got those parents, eh? So the next question to all the candidates is on energy poverty. BC Hydro's rates have risen about 47% since 2010. How many of you are feeling the rate increase? They will climb another 7% in the next 2 years and more beyond then, as BC Hydro struggles with its debt, including the costs of Site C. Last year, the BC Utilities Commission heard evidence from the BC Old Age Pensioners and its allies that 17 to 20% of BC households experience energy poverty, defined as spending more than 10% of after-tax income on home energy. People with energy poverty report hardships such as going hungry in order to avoid disconnection of their hydro service. Other jurisdictions offer low-income assistance with electricity bills. For example, Ontario, which is a serious problem in this area, offers a sliding scale from $30 to $75 per month. The question is, what would you do to address energy poverty in BC? And the question goes first to Jordan.
So at the heart of this issue, it's not just about energy, but it's about poverty in general. Because people living in poverty, they are faced with the unfortunate fact they have to decide between choosing certain necessities and needs, whether that be energy, energy for your home or groceries. These are all factors of energy poverty, and it's really just a problem of poverty. So what are the expenses that people in poverty are facing the most? These are such as energy and housing, transport, and our current form of MSP are all very large problems that people living in poverty are facing. So we need to address all these facts. It can't just be addressed through lowering hydro rates or subsidies for people who can't afford their hydro. So when we look at the energy, yes, I support, as I said earlier, a lowering of our hydro rates by not allowing surpluses to leave BC Hydro, but to be used them to lower the rates. And when we look at housing, well, in BC right now, as we all know, there's a large demand for our houses. And I believe we need to lower that demand by a foreign buyers tax, which has been implemented by the BC Liberals. And I would support an increase in that tax, as well applying it to the Greater Victoria area, and to make sure to look into any other areas that are being affected by foreign buyers in a negative way. With transport, we need to invest in public transport to allow alternative options. We all, or many of us drive cars, I know I do, and you pay for insurance, you pay for gas, and you pay for car parts, and if you have to pay for a mechanic. These are all expenses that are common to a lot of us. If we can have a good public transportation system, those people who can't afford a car can use other forms of transportation to get around, lowering a lot of their costs. And many of us probably spend $4,000 or $5,000 a year just on our car alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And the next speaker on this topic of energy poverty is Adam Olson of the Green Party.
I just say it's no wonder why the Mr. Roberts, the Liberal candidate, didn't want to come this evening, because BC Hydro and the the increasing hydro rates have been a major issue on the doorstep when I'm talking to people. I've had Liberal supporters who say that they had a fight with their hydro bill, a fist fight with their hydro bill, one gentleman called it, when it showed up and he was away. Look, the hydro rates are going up, and you know what? The BC Hydro doesn't have surpluses. Unfortunately, what they're doing in order so that the BC Liberals can say they've got balanced budgets is they're deferring it into deferral accounts, and then they're giving $1 billion or so to the BC Liberals, and so the Liberals are using hydro as a bank account or a bank machine. Look, I worked in on-reserve housing, and I've seen how this impacts people. CMHC will provide a certain amount for housing, and in the wintertime, many First Nations across the country are either having to pay for their mortgage for the house, the on-reserve house, or they're paying for hydro. And of course, they pick hydro, and then they go into arrears. It's very similar to what's happening out here. People are falling further and further behind. The BC Green Party has an income security strategy. It's on our platform. It's fully costed. I encourage you to go check it out. But we're working towards moving towards.
Question more directly, which was about
Has taken as being an industry that is strong in BC. But the thing that I oppose about the current approach to it is the fact that the Liberal government decided to invest in it. This is something they took taxpayer dollars for, and they put into the liquefied natural gas industry. But what happened was global markets fell, and now we don't have an industry really at all of liquefied natural gas because there's not much of a global market for it. If we are going to ever have a liquefied natural gas industry, it's going to be because global markets provide it. It's not going to be because it's coming out of your pockets to make it. When it comes to the environmental impact of LNG, the real big concern for me is with the hydraulic fracking. It contaminates groundwater, and it destroys large portions of our northern forests or wherever they are fracking. I think that we need to have strict regulations in place that hold the companies responsible for what they have done to the environment and for specifically how it is affecting those who live in that area. People have their water contaminated, their taps, they can't trust that they're on boiling regulations where they have to boil their water before they can even drink it or sometimes even bathe in it because of the toxins that are in the water. This is where we need to hold companies responsible. And this is where we need to really focus our environmental concern with hydraulic fracking. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And now to Gary Holman, the new Democratic Party candidate.
Well, simply put, we'll be implementing a carbon action plan that was essentially recommended by the climate leadership team that will meet greenhouse gas reduction targets for 2030 and 2050, the same targets that are supported by the Green Party, the targets that will not be put in place if we re-elect a Liberal government in British Columbia. In terms of fracking specifically, what we proposed is to establish an independent scientific inquiry. Andrew Weaver is fond of the term evidence-based decision-making. That's exactly what we're going to do, and we're going to take recommendations from that independent panel, not the Oil and Gas Commission of British Columbia, but an independent panel who will make recommendations around regulation, monitoring, and taxing. In the legislature, aside from the new income tax that was proposed for LNG projects in British Columbia, we opposed each and every piece of legislation around LNG introduced by the BC Liberal government, including the so-called emissions control legislation that did nothing to control 75% of the emissions upstream from the LNG facilities. We have already said that we said in 2013 that we would broaden the application of the carbon tax to include upstream emissions, and through taxation, monitoring, and regulation, we will reduce methane emissions in the fracking process by at least 50%. In terms of the safety issues around earthquakes, Elizabeth May's recent newsletter suggested a buffer area around key facilities. That's the kind of recommendation that would come out of an independent panel. That's how we'll proceed on this issue.
Thank you, Gary. And now to Adam Olson, Green Party candidate.
The BC Green Party's been really consistent on our feelings on LNG. Andrew Weaver has done an amazing job in the legislature holding the government to account on this issue, calling into question the economics, calling into question the environmental aspects, concerning environmental aspects and the social aspects of this. And frankly, the provincial government has been completely irresponsible on this file, and as a result, we have a project that's been proposed in the Saanich Inlet. So we've been incredibly consistent. We are going to put a moratorium on fracking, and we will add fugitive emissions to the carbon tax. We were going to account for the real costs of this. Look, the Climate Action Team was forced to put LNG into their recommendations. That was part of their mandate. And so it's pretty difficult to come around and defend that now. They probably wouldn't have had they not been forced to. And look, when I watched the debate on the LNG Income Tax Act, it's so frustrating and actually adds to the erosion of trust that I have in the official opposition. They argued for days about how this was a sellout, and Andrew Weaver called it a generational sellout. So did others in the NDP caucus. And then they vote in favor of it. And when they come out of that vote, the response from the leader, from John Horgan, was that, well, we don't want to be cast as being against everything. We can't have that kind of politics playing out in some of the most important decisions that are going to be made, and we need an opposition on this, a strong opposition, and the BC Greens can help create that strong opposition, and I am ready to do that in this legislature in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Adam. And now on the rebuttal, again, back to Jordan.
I just want to say that the only way that LNG is going to become a strong sector in BC is if it doesn't cost BC taxpayers anything, if it benefits BC taxpayers, and if the global markets have a need for it. China has a large need for it for LNG because it is a cleaner burning of fossil fuels rather than the heavier coals that China uses. And they have a large smog problem in China. This means we have a market for it. We just need to make sure it is very regulated and make sure that people do not get harmed in the process.
Thank you. Gary.
Well, just quickly, Adam mentioned the moratorium. My understanding is the Greens are also doing a review of fracking. So similar positions there. And just to repeat, except for the special new income tax on LNG, the BC NDP opposed every bit of LNG legislation introduced by the BC Liberals.
Thank you, Gary. And Adam.
That LNG Income Tax Act is awful. It's a sellout. It's the the LNG industry came back several times asking the Liberals to drop it so that they could then be competitive. And then the NDP supported the bottom that you can get. Look, they approved wood fiber, jumped on it because the industry was moving forward, approved wood fiber.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we have now come to the end of the prepared questions, and we're going to take just a little short stretch break. Before we do that, I'm going to remind you, if you wish to ask questions of the candidates, you have two ways of doing it: lining up here at the mic, or giving your written question to the people that are collecting them or who are at the back of the room. They'll be doing some sorting and handing them to me. You will also notice 3 or 4 jars moving around asking you for donations. Please be generous. It takes money to put on these events. Okay. Thank you. And, you know, a little bit of stretching, a good idea. Stand up in your seats and get your hands up in the air a bit. Yeah, that's right. Yes, I'll do it right when we do this. Okay, folks, I'm going to ask you to come back and gather together. I'll give you a minute or two. There's cookies, I know. So, it was very pleasant to have you there, and I had a good idea of your positions on things. Yeah, it was very reasonable and kind of fitted into the debate. Not that you would be unreasonable, but I enjoyed you. You don't know me. I could be extremely unreasonable. I know. Well, I didn't experience that. All right, we're just doing this. Okay, the donations. Yeah, I know. He said he had to do a bathroom run. Okay, as soon as Adam is back, we will get going. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So if people could come back to their seats, given that a number of people have left, if you're willing to move up, that would be lovely because it's nicer for the candidates when there's a closer crowd. Okay. We're just waiting for Gary, and as soon as he's back, no, we're waiting for Adam. As soon as he's back, we'll get going. Here he comes. Okay. So I'm just going to review the rules for this part of the event. So folks, if you want to continue conversations, I'm going to ask you to do it outside the room because we have a commitment to keep this moving as quickly as possible. Happy to have you do it outside if you want to. The rules are 30 seconds to ask your question. And then the candidates all have 1 minute to respond. You can ask your question to one candidate or you can ask it to all of them. That's your choice. And if you only, after we've had the answers, I will only allow a rebuttal if the candidates really indicate to me that they feel a rebuttal is necessary. So I'm going to ask you to, exercise some self-discipline around that so that we get the most number of questions from the audience. Okay? All right. So things are quieting down. Can I ask some of the volunteers to move people out that are having conversations so that we can focus on the candidates, please? Okay, so I'm going to take the first question from the mic, and please give your name and state your question.
Hello, my name's Diana Lindley, and I'm a lifetime resident of the Saanich Peninsula. As we are all very well aware, climate change and the need to transition to a 100% renewable energy system is it's evident and imminent, and we need a rapid de-escalation of carbon and will require unprecedented cooperation. My question to the three candidates is, are you willing to cooperate? Are you willing to consider an electoral reform that will be inclusive and egalitarian? And with that question, would you consider creating a coalition in the short term so that we could indeed move forward to a new government?
So the question is both on electoral reform, your position on that, and your willingness to form a coalition government.
Yeah.
Got it? Thanks
you.
very much. Okay, and we start with Adam on this one from the Green Party.
Yeah, so look, the BC Greens are very clear. Participatory democracy has been a long-time part of our 6 core principles. We absolutely, and in fact, as the interim leader of the BC Greens, I had several conversations, and I'll always be willing to work with all 87 members of the legislature. I think that it's important to acknowledge that we're going through a democratic process right now, an exchange of ideas. Gary and I actually like each other very, very much, but today we're having a vigorous debate and an exchange of ideas, and it's very important that we go through this democratic process On May the 9th, the voters of British Columbia will determine who the next government is. Not us, we won't. We'll do our job, and then on May 9th, it's up to you. And after that, we'll find out where the seats and the seat allocations have been, and that's when it becomes our responsibility to represent the interests of British Columbians as best we possibly can. And that's the time when we have those kind of conversations, depending on what the seat count is.
Thank you, Adam. Jordan Templeman.
So regarding electoral reform, I am in favor of proportional government. Personally, I think it is a very strong system that will lead to more involvement in our political system because people will be more interested because every vote counts. Although I do believe it has to be done through referendum, and that is because it is not up to the politicians, in my opinion, to choose how we are elected. It has to be done through a referendum, and that is through the choices of the people. To talk about coalition governments, well, as an independent, that's really one of the main things that independent has to do, is they have to work with the parties that are in the legislature. And absolutely, I will work with all three parties in the legislature. I will work and to try and find the best benefit for our district.
Thank you, Jordan. And now Gary Holman from the NDP.
Well, thanks. That's a great question. On the eve of an election, I don't see the parties collaborating at this point. Unfortunately, it's going to be up to voters. As critic for democratic reform, I'm very proud of the NDP position because I don't think it's necessarily in our best long-term partisan interests, but we're proposing to put electoral reform back to voters with a 50% plus one approval threshold. We would have single transferable vote right now, except Gordon Campbell set it at 60%. So this will give British Columbia the best chance it's ever had in its modern history to change our voting system. That will completely change the dynamic in the legislature. I'm absolutely happy to work across partisan lines. I work with Adam on Grace Islet. And by the way, in terms of standing up for the constituency, I was the one that was slapped by the landowner around Grace Islet. I was the one sitting in court with Chief Fern Jacks and Don Tom. So please don't doubt my willingness to stand up for this constituency.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, so this is a follow-up on the Site C discussion. This is one of the written ones. The UBC study on Site C recommended the project be sent to the BC Utilities Commission. This is the one that was in the news just this week. Do you think this is the best way to stop the project? So it's pushing back a little bit more still on the Utilities Commission. And I'm going to go to Jordan first on this, and then Gary.
I have no problem with there being any number of reviews of the Site C dam, but to be entirely honest, whether the result says it's a positive, I'm still opposed to it because we don't need the power. And as I said earlier, Crown Corporations, they're here to provide a service and not to make a profit. So if somehow we've got all the numbers wrong and the review shows us that we do need the power, then I would reconsider it. But the numbers seem pretty concrete at this point that we don't need it and it is not going to provide any benefit to BC residents. So putting it to a UBC review is something that can be done, and it's a great way to get more information on the topic, but I don't really know if it's needed to make a final decision on the Site C dam.
Thanks, Jordan. Now to Gary.
Well, I think I've already made the NDP position clear. We would be referring Site C to the Utilities Commission as recommended by the chair, Harry Swain, of the Joint Review Panel, who said it was a dereliction of duty for the Premier of this province not to refer the single largest infrastructure in British Columbia to the Utilities Commission, as did the study done by the University of British Columbia. Look, we're talking about billions of dollars here. If you're pretending to form government in British Columbia, you have to be prepared to do your due diligence. You're either prepared to undertake due process or you're not. And once again, the University of British Columbia study validated our position to refer that project, as with all other power projects in British Columbia, to the Utilities Commission. We are convinced that comparing Site C to our Power BC alternative, which focuses on energy conservation, we are absolutely convinced the Utilities Commission, as it did once before, will say
Thank you,
no
Gary.
to Site C.
Thank you, Gary. And Adam.
I just want to be clear, I'm not pretending. I'm very serious about representing our riding and Saanich in the legislature. So there's no pretending. You look around our riding and you'll see that there's no pretending in this candidacy. The best way to stop it at this stage of development is through political will. The longer it's delayed, the more difficult the decision it is for the BC Utilities Commission to make a decision against it. And so we are going to show the political will. We've already shown the political will that we are going to say no to Site C. We've said no to Site C, and we stand by that.
Okay, all right. So I've had a request for rebuttal, so 30 seconds.
So you could tell me, do you think Site C is going to be stopped by electing one or two more Greens? Do you actually believe that? Or do you think Site C, or do you think Site C, Kinder Morgan, Steelhead LNG, what is the best chance you have of stopping those projects is to change government in British Columbia?
Okay, and 30 seconds to get.
Of British Columbia voters. I think it is a clear indication of exactly where nobody owns that vote.
Alliance of Greater Victoria.
British Columbia, and BC is
tell me that if we have
proportional representation, we have some consensus on, and so that's a great place to start, I think.
Okay. Thank you. And now Gary.
Well, as critic for democratic reform for the NDP, you'll hardly be surprised to know that I do support it. I supported the referendum in 2005, which got a 58% result, and in 2009, which got a 38% result. And because of the last result, we believe we need a mandate from voters. We're not prepared, unlike the Greens, to simply impose it on the public without getting a mandate. My job was to confer with advocacy groups like Fair Vote Canada, Fair Voting BC. Some of you may be sitting here in the room involved with those organizations. That's why we believe we need a mandate, but at 50% plus one, it will give British Columbia the best chance it's ever had to change our voting system so that every vote counts. Once we have a PR system, parties will actually be forced to cooperate, to collaborate. That's how it's going to happen in British Columbia. The NDP, if we form government, will give BC the best chance it's ever had to actually accomplish this.
your most important issue in the environment and sustainability?
I think the carbon tax is a key one. I'll pick another one. The environmental review process, completely broken in British Columbia, and it needs to be reviewed.
That's it. Thanks, Gary. All right, and Jordan?
Yes, personally, I do support proportional representation, but as I said earlier, it's not a decision for, in my opinion, for a politician to make or our legislature. It has to be done through referendum. I side with Gary on that one. It needs to be in the hands of the voters, how we are elected as politicians. My top priority, I will say, is the carbon tax, and specifically where it goes. Because with the carbon tax, there is a lot of confusion on exactly where we should put it, or not confusion, but difference of opinion on where we should put it. Currently, a lot of it goes to rebates to corporations, companies, and individuals. I don't see this as the purpose of the carbon tax. I believe the purpose of the carbon tax is to promote green energy. And the way we do that is we take those revenue and go directly to green energy.
Thanks, Jordan. Adam has asked for a 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, I just would like to say that the BC Greens approach on electoral reform is very similar to what was taken in New Zealand. We've said that this election would be that referendum. If the BC Greens get elected, then we will move forward. We haven't said what system we would move forward on because that's the part of the consultation that we want to engage in. It's important to remember that the second attempt failed at 38%. The 50 plus 1% that's being proposed here is still above that. And the question that's going to be asked is very, very important on this.
Thank you very much, Adam. And now, of course, all of the other candidates wish to rebut too. So Gary and then Jordan.
Well, just quickly on New Zealand. New Zealand has had, and we consider that as an official opposition, New Zealand has had 3 referenda. New Zealand had 2 referenda in order to get to a PR system, and then after they had a PR system, a referendum to decide if they want to go back. We're not going to be imposing this on British Columbians, unlike the BC Greens.
Okay, thank you. And Jordan.
The thing that scares me about the BC Green policy on this is that they don't have a particular form of proportional representation set out. If they did, I would be more willing to agree with Adam that a vote for Green can be a vote for change of our proportional system. But if we don't know what even form of proportional system they want to implement, then how can a vote for Green be a vote for proportional change?
Thank you, Jordan. Okay, and now to the next written question. So we're alternating. Considering biodiversity, eco-cultural integrity, and carbon storage, so this is still within the energy frame, although it's a little beyond it too, do you support a moratorium on old growth logging? And the first response goes to Adam.
Yes, I'm very proud that in our forestry, the natural resources platform in the forestry section, we committed to doing an inventory and the protection of old growth forests in British Columbia.
Thank you. And now Jordan.
With our forestry sector, it has to be sustainable, and the cutting of old growth forests in many situations is just not sustainable. So unless we are absolutely reliant on it and it's a last option, no, I don't support it. But we have a forestry sector in BC, and I do support that. And in this situation where we need to use old growth forest, which normally we don't, it's just a cheaper option, which I don't support. But I would support it in a last-ditch effort to support our forestry sector.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. And Gary.
So the BC NDP presented private members legislation to establish biodiversity targets for flora and fauna in British Columbia, to restore the capacity of our resource management agencies to do their job, to hire new conservation officers, forestry officers, to actually monitor and enforce the rules that now apply. Please remember the legacy of the NDP here in terms of forestry in British Columbia. We've created most of the parks in British Columbia, and I know this because as an economist, as I said before, worked on processes that doubled parkland. Dave Barrett created Ruckle Park. We created Todd Gallant here in the constituency. The ALR we created. The NDP has left a huge legacy on the land use side, which, by the way, these legacies are also very large carbon sinks in British Columbia. That's the legacy we've left behind.
Thank you, Gary. Rebuttal from Adam.
Let's just think back to the 1990s, a formative time for me when I started to get into politics. Remember the war in the woods. Remember Clayoquot Sound. I have a question, Mr. Holman. You didn't answer the question. Are you going to protect old growth forests?
And I guess you'd like a rebuttal. Gary.
So we'll establish targets and we'll work towards that goal, just like we did in the 1990s. And by the way, the comment about the unions and whether or not we're controlled by unions, those land use tables, and I supported a number of them as an economist, the unions sitting at those tables didn't particularly like the fact that we were creating new parkland over timber harvesting land base. And if you put a moratorium on old growth, you're going to throw thousands of workers out of work on Vancouver Island. We're not prepared to do that. You are.
Okay, to the next question at the mic, please.
Yes, hello, thank you. My name is Delmar Marte. I'm a candidate for the Esquimalt chosen riding area, and I'm here just as a service. I have actually found a solution, a vaccine against poverty, and I was wondering if you candidates would like to accept my documentation to read at a later date.
And that's your question, just whether they will accept it? Well, okay, so could you do that quickly, please? Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Jordan, Adam, and Gary, and oh, Stephen Roberts, Liberal Party. Well, I think we can all say we can see right through him. So, my question would be red tape. We have a ministry that is in charge of red tape. That's like a Monty Python kind of skit. What would you do about the Ministry of Red Tape? Thank you.
Okay, the first is to
If you
Jordan.
need more clarification on that,
What do you
you got that?
What
Okay.
do you do to eliminate red tape?
yeah, red
That's
tape.
really
You
your
know, they got a
question.
ministry on it. I don't think we need it, but
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
And it's Dan. Again, your name? Dan? Your name?
Delmar.
Delmar. Thank you,
Marte.
Delmar.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to acknowledge because I know you had learned you were a candidate after we had the meeting the other day. Okay, Jordan, to you.
To be entirely honest, red tape is something that is not, I've said this before, and it really sucks to have to say it twice one night. It's not something that I've focused on in my campaign. So I don't have a platform. I'm absolutely willing to look into it and get back to you on that. Come talk to me afterwards, and I'll give you my contact, and I'll let you know my opinions on that topic.
Appreciate your honesty on that, Jordan. Gary.
So I guess I'm not clear about the question. It's about establishing a ministry of red tape?
Just for clarification, there's a part of the ministry that has actually red tape that we don't have a government, by the way, right now. They're all candidates. So candidate Christy Clark, and they're asking questions of the general public. Now, if the government doesn't know all the stuff that's going on within the ministries, and they want to ask us how to fix it, I think they're out of whack. But what would you do to then, maybe red tape? Do we need a ministry for red tape, really?
Okay, thank you.
I think you can interpret this in different ways, so feel free.
Yeah. I don't think we need a ministry dedicated to reduction of red tape. I think that we want to always be looking for ways to make things more cost-effective, reduce costs for businesses. That's one reason why I've been stressing energy conservation that will reduce costs not just for households, but for businesses. Those kinds of investments, getting control of our power development in British Columbia, way more important to small businesses and their cost structures than any amount of red tape.
Okay, thank you. And now to Adam. So, no, hold on. I did it wrong here, didn't I? It is Adam? Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your question, Delmar. There was a Ministry of Red Tape. Minister Coralie Oakes was the Minister of Red Tape. One of the first things that she did was bring a motion in to celebrate red tape reduction in British Columbia with the Red Tape Reduction Day Act. Andrew Weaver proposed that we amend that bill and move it from the third Wednesday of March to the 1st of April. When that failed, he again proposed that we cut more red tape on May the 9th, and the people of British Columbia will have that opportunity to cut a lot of red tape on May the 9th. Unfortunately, this is another example of where there's inconsistency because our colleagues in the NDP articulated many arguments against the need for a day to celebrate red tape reduction and then voted in favor of it. With incomes made in the legislature and then the actions that follow them up.
Thank you. So the next question from the audience is, what role could nuclear power play in your energy strategy in the light of recent advances in nuclear waste treatment? And the first person on this is Adam Olson.
We have no plans for nuclear power in our province. There is plenty of renewables for us to harvest. The sun, the wind, the tide, and the heat that's generated from our Earth's core. Those are the focuses that we have, and we have no plans for nuclear energy.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. And now Jordan.
As well, I see no need for nuclear energy in BC. There are some places in the world where nuclear energy is a positive for their economy and for their energy needs, but we don't really need more energy in BC. We have a dam that's being built that none of the energy would really be used for another 20 years. We don't have a problem with the amount of energy, it's the cost of our energy. With nuclear energy, I don't see a need for it in BC at all.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Now, Gary Holman?
No, of course we don't need it. In fact, I believe there's legislation in place that actually prevents even mining for uranium. We do have alternatives, and again, I would emphasize as an energy economist that the best investment you can make is to actually reduce energy demand. And given our surplus of power in British Columbia, that's where we need to focus on reducing consumption to drive down costs, to drive down rates for households and businesses. It will create way more jobs throughout British Columbia without the damaging effects of Site C or, in this case, a nuclear reactor.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Now, I'm noting that if we're going to get through all the written and the lineup here, we're going to have to speed up a bit because I don't want to keep people here too long. Just remind you, you don't have to put all your questions to all of the candidates. It's up to you if you want to do it. And now, over to you at the mic, please.
Okay, my name is Harold Wolf, and I think I'd like to address my question to Gary and Adam, and they already know what's coming, because I'm single-mindedly obsessed with stopping steelhead. So I've got a two-part question, basically. We talked before about fracking, but let's remember that steelhead is controlled by an Alberta company that is focused on selling Alberta gas, in partnership with an American pipeline company that has 62 feeder points to its network, only one of which comes from Canada. So we have no control over the fracking at the other end of the pipe for this project. It's coming here and we don't even get any royalties. So we might get a dozen caretaker jobs out of this whole thing and destroy our inlet. So you know, we need to address that. This is a non-starter for our region, and I really want you to reinforce that. And in the meantime, Steelhead actually has a permit to do geotechnical drilling in the inlet starting in June. And just like they did, 2 years ago, we had the battle on Burnaby Mountain. I want to lead a battle in Saanich Inlet, and I'm going to be out there interrupting them in my canoe, and I want to know if you'll be with me.
Okay, so your question is, are you with me?
Are you with me?
Stopping this. Okay. Gary, you first.
Well, I've made it very clear my opposition to steelhead. In fact, I announced that on the Sartlip First Nation at a Sierra Club event. I did my due diligence on the project. I wrote all of the First Nations, all of local governments, published a letter in the PNR, published a survey to get feedback from the public on my website. When the 4 Saanich First Nations came out against Steelhead LNG, I announced my opposition shortly thereafter. In terms of civil disobedience, you know, I've stood on logging roads on Salt Spring Island. I walked onto Grace Islet in opposition to the desecration of that First Nations site. I'll consider my options, Harold. I won't say yes or no. I will point out that in the past, I have taken such measures, and if push comes to shove, I'll consider my options at that time.
Thank you, Gary. And now Adam.
I did my due diligence. 15 years of fishing in the Saanich Inlet, 20 years of fishing in the Saanich Inlet is the due diligence that I needed. I took no pause in opposing this insane project, which is, by the way, moving forward. I'm glad that Mr. Roberts isn't here to try to cloud that. I'm very clear. It is moving forward, not will it move forward. And so the reality is I've been with this all along the way, leading at the front end. I've been in the opposition of this project. I will continue to be opposed to this project. There will never be LNG in the Saanich Inlet as far as I'm concerned, and I'll be right at the front end of that.
Thank you. The next written question. The federal 2017 budget has several $100,000 for green infrastructure. how would you ensure that this was actually spent on green issues rather than on mega project development? And the first person to speak on this will be Gary.
Several hundred thousand?
Several hundred thousand, that's what it says, for green infrastructure. You think it should be more than that?
It seems like an awfully small number for Canada. Look, we would, BC NDP government will partner with local governments, with federal government, with non-government organizations to pursue our carbon action, our climate action plan. Again, our carbon tax increases will generate $240 million dollars a year, which we will use to partner with local governments, with individual homeowners, businesses, local governments, to drive those greenhouse gas emissions down by investing in things like public transit, energy conservation retrofits, and clean technology. And of course, we would be a partner with the federal government as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, Adam?
A BC Green government would be not just, we'd be definitely working with the federal government, but we will be driving the agenda in this discussion with the federal government. Our climate action commitments are stronger than the federal government has required of British Columbia because we were once leaders in this. We've become laggards in this issue, and a BC Green government sees the opportunity for British Columbia to lead, be leaders in this again. So we're not willing to just accept what the federal government is asking of or what they're able to negotiate with all the other provinces. We want to show Canada leadership, and that's the plan that we've put forward.
Okay, thank you. Jordan?
Absolutely. On a provincial scale, we need to work with the federal government and municipalities. That is without saying. If we're going to get to a point where we have strong green energy in our economy, this has to be something that is tackled on all fronts. As has been a huge topic of tonight is the carbon tax, and that's where we're going to get our funding for green energy, and that's where we are going to directly fund green energy. So yes, I would work with the federal government to answer the question with whatever they're willing to put in on whatever regulations they put on provinces. And I would go above and beyond that with the carbon tax.
Thank you, Jordan. So just to let the candidates know, I'm going to go back to the top for the rotation that was at the top of the audience questions, because we've used up all the ones that we had planned here. So over to the next speaker at the mic.
Okay, thanks. Hi there. My name is Alex Alves. I am from Light Cross Holdings. We do scientific research and experimental development. We are a member of the Sustainable Energy Association. So my question goes back to the generation of electricity. It seems to me that most of the technology that we have goes back to more than 100 years ago, 1800s, and if tomorrow a group of scientists came and told you that for each kilowatt of energy that went in a machine, another 5 kilowatt came out as product, how would you react to that, and how would that change our communities?
Okay, is that clear enough to you, the question?
Yeah.
Yes, you're willing to jump in, Adam? Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm first, right? Is that right?
Yes, yes, you were.
I would say congratulations. Bring it into my office. Let's sit down and have a conversation. Let's talk about how we can make this happen. It would be somewhat unbelievable, but this is the innovation and creativity that the BC Green Party wants to unleash into our future. We would be fully embracing these kind of ideas, these innovations, and we would be willing and excited to support this kind of entrepreneurialism. We're not going to stand in the way of this kind of creativity. This is exactly what the 21st century is all about, is this kind of innovation. It's the reason why we've decided to set up an emerging economy task force, even though that was downplayed earlier, and why we want to have an innovation commission so that we can take these kind of discoveries and innovations in British Columbia and bring them to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Adam. And now, Jordan?
Just to clarify the question, it's if someone brings to me a machine that you put 1 kilowatt in, you get 5 out. So essentially, unlimited clean energy.
Exactly. Sustainable.
Okay, sustainable, unlimited clean energy. Well, that would definitely be an amazing feat, whoever comes up with that. And it needs to be implemented right away if it's cost effective. If it's put 1 in, you get 5 out. We would have to do a complete overhaul of our energy system if we can have that sort of free energy, in this situation. Yeah, absolutely. It would be something that I would, of course, have the provincial government. I would support the provincial government getting involved in to make sure that it is not kept hold of so that by private corporations to make a profit, but it's something that is definitely of public interest, because if we have the ability to have unlimited sustainable energy, it needs to be available to all BC residents.
Okay, thank you. And now Gary?
Well, you're making a pretty remarkable claim, sir, and I would of course love to talk to you about it, but quite frankly, I'm not competent to judge whether or not your technology works or not. Again, we would be establishing funds to invest in green technology, and if your invention or proposal proved itself, then the BC NDP government would consider an investment. Again, though, I stress that we've got to do our due diligence on such matters. If it's larger scale, I would insist that your project be reviewed by the Utilities Commission. And just a reminder, look, the sun, the wind, those are also virtually unlimited sources of power. The real question is, what's the cost per kilowatt hour of generating that, and you need to compare it against conservation. That's my benchmark, and if you meet that benchmark, you could expect funding under a BC NDP government, but it would have to be proven out as appropriate technology.
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you. Thank you. You got the energy going in the room here about possibilities. To try to speed this up, I'm going to actually make some of these 30-second answers, which I think you can do, okay? So this next one is a 30-second, and it'll start with Jordan. Will your party or you offer monetary incentives to people wanting to incorporate green energy in their homes, i.e. solar panels? 30 seconds.
Absolutely. I think that when we have individuals taking those steps forward, not just corporations or groups, special interest groups, that needs to be supported, and I would support it through tax breaks for something that is proportional to how much they are saving on energy and how much they are actually proving to help a cleaner environment.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Absolutely. Net metering with BC Hydro needs to be improved to provide those financial incentives you could expect through our Power BC program and also our climate action program. Just a small example ago, again though, comparing to conservation. To replace all of the light bulbs in your house with LED bulbs, I've been told would cost about $900. To produce that same amount of power, solar panels would cost 10 times as much.
Thank you. And Adam?
Yeah, this is a key piece to behavioral change. I agree, by the way, that increasing efficiency in your home is a great way to save power, but I also think that part of this is going to be based around our commitment to make sure that the low carbon choice is the default choice, and that's what we're investing in.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to now go to the next one at the mic. I'll judge the timing on it once I hear your question.
Sure. My name's Jerry Gatos. I'm an unapologetic advocate for electric vehicles and solar energy. My question is related to subsidies, grants, and financial support for working families and people who live in multiple unit buildings to move to renewable energy and electric vehicles. Currently, the BC government gives grants for people buying new electric vehicles, but most working families can't afford a new electric vehicle. So used electric vehicles should be included in that program. And similarly, I keep hearing people living in apartment buildings and condominiums saying that they have no place to charge. So the specific request would be, would you propose or implement a program that subsidizes and supports working families and people in multiple unit buildings to move to electric vehicles, new or used, and to include solar in their personal choice bundle so they could drive on sunshine. Basically,
To include, could you just be clear on the second one? To include solar in the vehicle?
no, include solar in the subsidy
charging.
package so that they're subsidized, they're given some assistance to get over the high threshold for the vehicle and the threshold for purchasing solar, because it sounds expensive to spend $9,000 to put solar on your rooftop. That would.
Okay, I'm just asking you to clarify the question. Are you, the candidates, clear enough on the questions here? Okay, all right. Gary, you're on.
Well, there are some existing incentives, but as you indicate, primarily for new. I would support also secondhand EV for sure, perhaps on a prorated basis, depending on the purchase price. In terms of the solar panels, I've indicated that we would be providing incentives for those kinds of investments. But again, I would urge that we need, when we're spending taxpayer dollars, we need to make sure we're maximizing our return on those dollars.
Thank you, Gary. Adam.
We have committed to introduce a mandate to ensure the increased access to zero-emission vehicles for sure. Although in our platform we haven't made the connection to the sunshine piece, but look, it's all part of our. It is all part of our mandate to again. The low carbon choice is the default choice. That's the pathway that we're going to be taking as a green government, is to ensure that we are increasing people's access to the low carbon choice and that they can make that choice easily.
Thank you. And now Jordan?
Yes, I would definitely be willing to look into legislation that gives tax breaks to even companies that build multi-unit buildings to implement charging stations within their buildings. I see that as being an extreme encouragement to those who have electric vehicles in that situation. As well, any other form of conservation efforts or clean energy efforts, I believe as long as we can make it sustainable, then we should be able to be funding it.
Thank you, Jordan. And before you go, I just want to appreciate a little bit of a historical moment here. It was through this gentleman that I made contact with somebody who had a second-hand smart car, electric smart car, to sell, and we now have it, and thank you for that, and we love it. Now we argue about who drives the smart car. Okay, I'm going to go, rather than take a written one, go directly to you.
Hello, I'm Hilary Strang. I'm from the Saanich Network, and I have a question that I would like to ask with deep respect for you, Gary. There is an exploration drilling that will be happening in the inlet very, very soon, and this is permitted by a governance system that is already in place, whereas sort of the fox is in the hen house. I believe that you personally are against this project. However, you start using words such as targets, goals, regulations, commissions. All those words to me sound like part of that already dysfunctional system. Also, you're part of a party that seems to me to have a dissonance on energy use and energy resources. So, what's the point? Do you feel that you could, when you make government, as you say that's the only way that change can happen, are you in a position to actually change those regulations, to make your party change all those regulations, change the system, and become in harmony in your intent as a party?
Is that a clear enough question to you, Gary?
I think so. I'll give it a shot.
Try.
Thanks, Hilary. Yes, we are going to change those rules. Absolutely. We haven't talked too much about the environmental review process in British Columbia, but it is completely broken. And yes, the only way those rules are going to change is if we change government in British Columbia. That's my contention. I think the arithmetic's fairly obvious. Unless we change this Liberal government, those rules will never change. And we're going to get Steelhead. We're going to get Site C. We're going to get Kinder Morgan. Under an NDP government, there is an opportunity, a chance to stop those projects. My personal commitment to stopping Steelhead remains, and it continues. I've taken the position, I've discussed this with John Horgan. John agrees with my position on Steelhead. To the issuing of those permits, I believe they were done not just without but without First Nations consultation.
Can I clarify?
No, I'm sorry you can't. So I'm sorry, but we're going to have to end. Well, what are the other two questions?
That you want.
To a referendum for Site C. Referendums are extremely expensive, and my opposition to Site C is the expenses. So I don't see a reason to put a referendum that would cost millions of dollars. Thank you, though.
Thank you, and we'll now move to the last question, please.
My name is Shirley McBride. I live on the Saanich Peninsula, and I originally came from Saskatchewan, where my family was very impressed with Tommy Douglas. Moving to British Columbia was like moving to a different country. And the NDP policies here have confused me as they relate to the environment. When I was first here, there was discussion about a carbon tax, and the NDP voted against it. Now, I understand you're for it.
So I'm going to ask you to get to the question if you can.
I understand that you were against, you were for Kinder Morgan, and now you're against it. And you say you're not supportive of LNG, but I understand from your comments that you are for wood fiber LNG. So my question is, how can a voter know that what your party really stands for?
Yes.
Thanks for the question. I think we've made it clear. We've written formally objecting to and opposing Kinder Morgan. I've taken a very clear position on Steelhead LNG, which my leader John Horgan is well aware of and has agreed to. One of the reasons we objected to the carbon tax in 2009 was because it doesn't have the elements that we're proposing now, i.e. Rebates to ensure that this regressive tax doesn't hit lower to middle income families first. So I think we're very clear on our positions today. If you elect a BC NDP government, we're going to do everything we can to stop Kinder Morgan. We'll be opposing Steelhead LNG. We'll be opposing Site C and referring that to a due diligence process under the Utilities Commission. Any prudent government should be doing this kind of work.
Thank you.
Okay, the question was to Gary. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, Adam, and 30 seconds to Jordan.
Look, I'm also very impressed with Tommy Douglas. I think the story in Mouseland is something that's very applicable here about cats and mice. Look, there are lots and lots of promises, and we remember sunny ways in the past federal election. We need an insurance policy. The BC Greens have proven to be that insurance policy, and in Saanich North and the Islands, we can elect a Green. Let's do that.
Thank you, Adam. And Jordan, last comment.
I'll just reiterate what I said in my opening statement, and that was, I am only swayed by the voters in our district here, which is all of you and everyone else living here. That means I'm not going to be swayed by the party, and I'm not going to be having to follow along the party lines, which I believe the question was concerning whether or not we can trust parties. And I think parties have their place, but I believe an independent can be a very, very strong representative.
Thank you, Jordan. So we are now going to move to the closing remarks from the three candidates, and then I have some announcements to make at the end. They won't be very long. But if anybody else has any announcements that they want, please write them and hand them to me, and I'll read them out at the end. So the closing remarks are 2 minutes each, starting with Jordan, then going to Adam Olson, and then Gary Holman. So Jordan Templeman, Independent.
Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I really enjoyed hearing your questions and getting a chance to answer them and debate them with the other two candidates here. Tonight I ask you to consider voting independent, and the reason is this. In the career of every representative, there comes a time where they have to make a very tough decision, and that decision is representing their constituents and the voice they have heard from the voters and representing the party that they serve in. When you have a party like, or when you have a party, members of that party feel the need to serve their party before their constituents. I don't have that conflict of interest because my party is the party of Saanich North and the Islands, and that's it. Right now, we see increases in tanker traffic, or we will see increases in tanker traffic sevenfold. We see our two major parties in British Columbia taking large party donations from corporations and unions. So I ask you this question. Do you feel represented right now? Do you feel like your views are being properly represented in our provincial government? Because I ask you this question because as an independent, that is my #1 priority. I will continuously be in contact with all of you and all the representatives, all the constituents I possibly can to get a good feel of what our riding is pushing for. That is my goal as a representative, and that is what I will do as your MLA. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And now the closing remarks from Adam Olson of the Green Party.
Thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you to the BCSEA for hosting this event, and thank you to my colleagues for this vigorous debate this evening on the most important issues of our time. The BC Green Party is good for democracy. In fact, I think we're great for democracy. We've added a lot to the legislature in Victoria. We add upward pressure that I think is necessary, another layer of transparency and another layer of accountability. We need to increase that voice in the legislature, not diminish it, not say that there's only one way to achieve better democracy in this province, but embrace the multiple ways that we can get a better democracy and better representation. Unfortunately, over the past 4 years, Mr. Holman has represented his party in every time, in every vote. And that would be to say that every vote that the NDP cast best represented Saanich North and the Islands, and frankly, I don't think it did. We've got great momentum in our riding. There's a ton of support for our campaign. I've got a great campaign, amazing campaign team, and a huge amount of support. Just look around the Saanich Peninsula and you can see the support growing on the front lawns of so many people. I'm so encouraged about the opportunity that we have in this election, and we have the opportunity for the future of British Columbia to embrace the 21st century, not get dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century like the establishment parties, My name is Adam Olson. I've lived my entire life on the Saanich Peninsula. I love this place. I believe in my responsibility to represent our home first. There is no whip. I will always be your representative. I'm seeking your trust and asking that you place your vote in my care for the next 4 years. Thank you. Heichka.
Thank you, Adam. And now Gary Holman for the New Democratic Party.
Well, thanks so much to the BC Sustainable Energy Association and for all you folks for coming out tonight, to my colleagues. It is unfortunate and I think disrespectful for the Liberal candidate not to show up for this debate tonight. There's two basic jobs of an MLA, I think: to be an advocate for the community. I think I've walked the talk in that respect. I've been an advocate for the National Marine Conservation Area. That's the direction we need to go, co-managed by First Nations, rather than industrializing our Salish Sea. I've been a strong advocate for public transit on the peninsula, and not just an advocate, but advocating a way to pay for that. I've been I've been opposing and I've spoken out publicly against the dangers of urban sprawl in this community, which we see in North Saanich and Central Saanich. It's easier to oppose the external demons. I oppose Steelhead, I oppose Kinder Morgan. We've done so in writing with Kinder Morgan. It's a little harder to deal with the internal conflicts, with our own environmental footprint, our own environmental impacts as a community, and I've spoken out on those issues. I'm the only person running for this office who has spoken out to deal with those internal conflicts. In terms of energy action, our climate action plan has been commended by organizations like the Pembina Institute, like Clean Energy Canada, like Mark Jacquard, the energy economist. It's a solid plan. We need to turn this ship around, and the only way you're going to turn this ship around is to change government in British Columbia. Having one or two more advocates around green energy isn't going to cut it, folks. We need to get rid of this Liberal government. And then we need to ban big money, which we are committed to do, and change the voting system so that it's fair for all parties, for independents as well, with a 50% plus one threshold, the best opportunity British Columbia has ever had in its modern history to change the voting system. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gary. So big appreciations to all three candidates who have been so vigorously part of this debate tonight. And I'm going to ask the three candidates with me to clap to you for the many minutes that you've put in being here and asking tough questions and hanging in there for, you know, a couple of hours. So thank you so much to you. A few other appreciations. First of all, for Shaw. I actually didn't realize how much setup was involved in taping a meeting like this. And it takes some hours to set it up and a fair number of staff to run the cameras and keep it organized. And so I want to appreciate Shaw for providing an important community service. And to announce that this session will be rebroadcast on May 1st at 6 p.m., May 2nd at 10 a.m., and May 3rd at 2 p.m. So, I'm sure you can find this out from Shaw if you've forgotten that piece. I also want to appreciate all of you for the money that you contributed. I don't know how much it is, but the treasurer has asked me to thank you, and I do with a full heart. Then I want to also thank all of the volunteers that made this happen all around the room. There's been a tremendous amount of work to pull this together, including also the staff from the community center, Dan, the sound guy, and his team of supporters. So thank you, all of you, for all of that work. And I just want to remind you two things, that there is a policy debate being held on the 27th at, is it at First Met? First Met United Church. For those of you who want to pursue this even further, and there will be representatives speaking on energy policy from they're the party policy, energy policy folks. And the Liberals will be there for that one. If you want to pursue this, please come to that. And please also remember to fill out your evaluations. If you didn't, it's been a pleasure working with you tonight. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank the moderator.
Thank you.